All right, everybody, welcome to Flourish Paints Flora Edition. My name is Jen Korolenko. I am Curator of Education and Public Programs for the Forsyth Galleries here at Texas A&M University. And if you're just joining us, just a reminder to put your screen on speaker view. That way you will see my demo as we go. Miss Abigail Roy from Flourish is here with us as well. I would ask actually that if you guys have any questions as we go on, I have set an alarm to remind me to stop and leave room for questions. So if you have questions as they come up, please just type them into the chat and I will be happy to answer them to the best of my ability when class is over. My setup's a little different this week. I am actually in my office as opposed to in my home. So my monitor is actually behind me. So I can't see anything that's going on. I can't see the chat and I can't see you guys. So that's unfortunate, but I think the filming setup is pretty nice for our purposes. This is a beginner watercolor class. Last week we worked on some loose and abstract flowers, and this week we are going to work on various kinds of leaves. So eventually when we're through with it, if you take all 6 sessions, we're working up to doing an actual landscape, which will incorporate a little bit of each of the skills that we're learning in every lesson. So this is just my sample page. I'm going to put that to the side. You may want to get a piece of scratch paper for later in the lesson and a pen or a pencil, just because we will practice drawing shapes of leaves as we get more advanced. And that just I find is very helpful in the process. And if you are using the Flourish set, you are using the Prang semi-moist watercolors. This is a basic pan of colors. I just pop that out of the case of my watercolors, and I'm going to use this as a palette. You can use any non-porous surface for this purpose. And make sure you have paper towels as well, because those are very important. The first thing that we're going to do today is I'm going to grab I'm actually going to work a little bit bigger than you guys would, just so you all can see a little bit better. But I'm grabbing this pretty large. This is a size 12 brush. Today we're going to be using all of our round pointed brushes in various sizes. I know if you have a Flourish kit, you got a few of those. So just put those to the side. Those are the ones we're going to be using to make leaves today. And we're going to start out by mixing a bunch of different colors of green. You can see that my palette looks really dirty. Well, that is just because I was practicing earlier. The beautiful part about watercolor is we can just wet our brushes and reactivate all of that mixing that I did earlier. Kind of get that going. We're going to start with a pretty basic palette. The colors are totally up to you. My goal is not for every single piece here to look the same. I would like for every single one to look a bit different. Painting is like handwriting. It should be quite different. But I'm going to start off by mixing another color to do a basic leaf shape. I'm just getting some of that water and wetting my palette. I'm going into my green, kind of picking up a good amount of it with this nice big brush. I'm then going to dip into my blue just a bit. I'm going to mute that just a tiny bit by adding some brown. So this will be a nice cool blue, a cool green rather. I don't know my colors, sorry. I'm also going to add right from the pan a bit of purple to that. I'm keeping it cool, but we have this beautiful Kelly green, forest green, somewhere in that neighborhood. But our brush is nice and saturated as we would like it to be. It's fully saturated in the pigment, but it is not so wet that it is dripping, and that is what we want. I just want to touch it to my paper towel to release any excess moisture that I might have laying around. And we're going to start by using the tip of our brush, just touching it to our paper and then pushing down and pulling up. Tip of the brush to the belly, down and pull up. Then we're just going to use the tip to sort of define the shape just a bit more. We can also deposit additional color. We're painting wet into wet today. So having a bunch of color pre-mixed actually is very, very helpful for our purposes. So this leaf looks quite lonely. So again, I'm going to start with the tip to the belly, tip to the belly, slightly flicking my wrist. I hold my pen weird. So I hold my paintbrush weird as well. Don't try to hold it in the claw that I use. I went to Catholic school, and I'm told that Catholic schools on the East Coast taught you incorrectly how to hold your pens and pencils. I don't know if that's true, but I guess it makes me feel less alone as a person who paints and draws with a claw. So I'm going to make another tip to the belly, tip to the belly. I'm going to just add a little bit of water to my brush, using that tip to really define the shape. And then we're going to connect this with a stem. So I'm just going to use the very tip of my brush and pull it down. And connect as so. And then I'm going to grab a little bit of a darker green pigment while I still got my brush and my leaves nice and saturated here. I'll let that go. I'm going to pick up some of this darker green color that I mixed earlier too. Not quite that browny, muddy green. And I'm going to kind of add a little bit of definition to that stem, like so. I'm barely touching the paper. Maybe we let it sort of bleed into the bottom there. And there we have a very, very basic leaf that we can add accents to later. So the same approach can be taken by using just one brush stroke instead of two to make the leaf. And we're going to start out with just a brush stroke like that. And from there, I'm actually going to pull down a stem. And here I'm going to create the leaf from going from the bottom up instead of from the top down, meaning I've got the tip of my brush just about to touch the stem, and I'm going to lightly pull up like so. Use that tip of my brush, and then from the opposite angle, we're making single brush stroke leaves here. Start up. I find it's easier for me to go up to the right and down from the left. That is just a personal preference. You, of course, do what is most comfortable for you. And just remember to utilize those beautiful colors that you have pre-mixed to add a little bit of depth to these really simple one brush stroke leaf structures. And they don't have to be uniform because nothing in nature really is. We all like to pretend that nature is full of symmetry, but there's always just a little bit of deviation. Maybe I add a couple of little baby leaves hiding in there. And for those, I'm just using the very tip of my brush to pull them out. I'm not adding any water, I'm not adding any pigment, I'm just letting it go as far as it can until I find that I'm running out of pigment on my brush. So this is an opportunity to make really delicate little leaves. Once you have that basic structure in there, I'm going to go ahead and wash my brush and blot. And I'm going to dip into kind of a grassy green. It's nice and bright. And I'm going to see what happens when I add some of that really nice bright pigment on top of the darker shades that I have already working here. And then I'm going to leave her alone. For this next one, we're actually going to make a little bit of a wider leaf. And if I'm going too fast, I will try to, in the Facebook event, link a couple of videos that are by somebody else on YouTube that are really, really helpful for doing this type of painting. And that way you can revisit them. Also, we're working on having the recordings of these sessions available after the fact too. Okay, so let's do a little bit of a wider leaf. I'm going to use that muddy, browny, swampy green that I mixed earlier. And I'm really going to get my brush nice and saturated with it. And I'm going to kind of hold it so I'm painting with the belly of the brush rather than the tip. And kind of create a round shape like this. So I'm letting my brush kind of create the shapes for me rather than creating something that's a bit more measured. I go back into that color, drop in some more of that. I'm going to pick up some of this blue green. Since we're mixing from a set palette and we're using primarily primary colors, it's going to be pretty difficult for you to make mud, to make colors that are not appealing. So really feel free to play around. I'm dropping that swampy green into the gray green that I put down and kind of letting that bleed all over the place. And then I'm going to add a touch of black. I want my brush just a bit to that already really deep browny color. I'm going to blot that. And I'm going to gently, with the tip of my brush, draw a stem starting with that first leaf up top and then kind of connecting them like so. And I'm not going to worry about a little bit of bleeding into the bottom of the stems. We're going to let that chill and come back to it. And that is going to sort of look like a eucalyptus kind of leaf when we're all done with it. And I'm going to wash my brush. Now let's do something a little bit more fun and switch to a smaller brush. I'm going to use the number 10 round, which is still pretty big. You might want to go smaller, like a 6 or an 8 if you've got it. Brush sizes are usually pretty uniform across brands. I'm going to get this guy moistened. Blot just a bit. And I am going to pick up some of this really deep blue and I'm going to add it to this puddle I already had going on my palette. And I'm actually going to add a little bit of purple to this. Whoa, a lot of purple. We're going to roll with it. That's what happens. You get overzealous, get a little excited. Okay, so we have like a deep blue-green. Pick up more green, actually. Watercolor gives you so much opportunity to play and grow and learn and just kind of let yourself relax a bit. Okay, so now I have a nice puddle of pigment that I'm going to use to make something that sort of looks like a cedar or evergreen if you really zoomed in on it. I'm going to just touch the tip of my brush to my paper towel up there to blot. And where can we put this guy so I'm not dragging? And we'll put him in here. So I'm going to start off this time by doing the stem. And then I'm going to do kind of like a stippling method, or I'm letting the color deposit itself kind of blotchy like that. And now to define the shape of the leaf, hold on, I have to wave my arm around. My lights are motion activated in my office. I can hear them beeping like they're going to shut off. Hold on one sec. Okay. So I'm going to kind of create like a guide for myself to follow by just painting these little guidelines. So we have kind of a leaf shape here. And I'm going to pick up a bit more pigment. But what I'm going to do is kind of treat each individual side in a triangular kind of way. Like we've got a triangle happening here. And then I'm picking up more pigment and I'm just dabbing that along the center to get additional depth. So we'll do that one more time. I'm starting at the top and I'm just going to kind of create what's this called? A scalene triangle or a cute triangle? I don't know. This is the small kind. I teach art, not math. Start at the top. I'm using the tip, but I'm also like kind of squishing it down. Again, picking up more pigment and filling in that center. It's a little bit too much. Just gonna pick up a little bit of water there. I'm gonna go a little faster just because I want to be able to show you so many different kinds of leaves. I didn't think that leaves could be so exciting. Maybe that's just me. Maybe that's just like the art nerd in me. But I find these very relaxing to create. I mean, I find all watercolor pretty relaxing, but for some reason, there's something very zen about painting leaves. So you can see there, I think there's a little bit of glare on my screen. So I will bring these a little bit closer so you can kind of see how they're setting up. I'm gonna wash my brush. Our eucalyptus is not quite dry yet. So we're gonna make a fern. Rotate my paper. Oh, yeah, maybe like that. Okay. I just don't want to drag my hand through my work here. I'm going to take a little brush for this. This is a number 6 brush. I'm going to pick up some water. Not too much. And let's go with, yeah, let's walk on the wild side and do it this way so you guys can see better. Let's add a little bit of that. Let's add a little blue, why not? Okay, so we have kind of a nice deep color. You can use a mossier color for this too, or like a grassier color. So again, we're gonna kind of build ourselves a skeleton from which to work on. So we're going to start with the stem, of course, barely touching the paper. Oh, that's a nice color. It's like mossy. Okay, so this is kind of like the same structure as the cedar, but it is a little bit more defined. So I'm taking the tip of the brush again and going right above where I drew that stem, and I'm kind of establishing a little dot and making it so there's 3 in a row there, and they're getting bigger from the bottom, like so. And then I'm going to paint myself a few guidelines from which to follow. And each time we get a little lower, your guideline gets a little wider. There we go. So you should have something that looks a little bit like this to start off. Pick up your pigment. My hand really helped dry that eucalyptus in the corner. And then we're going to just make little dots all the way down, starting with that one at the top. And it's that basic leaf shape that we started with, but kind of in a mini way. It's a miniature version of that first leaf shape. Doesn't have to be perfectly symmetrical. If you know that satisfies you in some way, then go for it. But if you're working kind of quickly like I am, don't worry about it. We are here to de-stress you, hopefully. Some of them will be bigger, some of them will be smaller. Some of them will be darker, some of them will be lighter. Again, the beauty of watercolor. Keep picking up pigment as I go, adding bits and pieces to other parts to add depth. So these little leaves don't even necessarily have to connect to the stems, but if you're into that kind of thing, you can go ahead and just use the tip of your brush to make sure they're grounded and connected as you go through. You shouldn't need to pick up any additional pigment. These ferns take patience. Imagine doing a giant one of these. So again, everybody's got a partner. We'll add stems just because. One more leaf. I'm excited. Making progress. And there's another approach where you can just do one brush stroke bits. Adding stems. Make this stem a little longer. Add a bit to the top there. And there we go. We have a fern leaf. Beautiful. And now that our other leaves are dry, we can then use this opportunity to dip into darker pigments and add a little bit of detail. Now this class isn't really going to be a like photorealism watercolor class at any point. We're implying realism. We're doing impressions of nature. So we're not really going to stress out about things looking exactly like they would in nature. Okay, so just to add a little bit of more interest and make this maybe look like eucalyptus a bit more, I'm going to use the tip of my brush and just add some lines, just like you did when you were a little kid. This was the basic leaf that everybody drew. Who knew that was an actual skill you would use later in life? I'm gonna pick a little bit more of that color up and really alternating with the depth and tone of your color. And that's really what's going to give your paintings more personality. Because we're all not going to make the same decisions. And that's why I'm not telling you what color specifically to use too, because I want you to make those decisions for yourself. Now, if you're feeling feisty, what you could do is make this a seeded eucalyptus plant or leaf. And the way to do that is to add additional little teeny stems and then use that same technique that we did for the fern or for the cedar, if you're feeling like that was more your style. And you add little sprigs, little seeds that pop up. There we go. Now, of course, you can go back to any of your leaves and add additional depth, like that cedar that we made. You can darken the stems if you'd like. That usually is a very easy way to add depth. And it's always going to be a little bit darker at the base or the center, like the stem. Just find that that makes it a little bit more three-dimensional. I'm going to add a little bit of more dimension to my fern. Okay. And then we have some very basic leaves to start out with. Now, the next ones that we're going to do, rip that to the side. We are going to do some fall kind of leaves, and this is where you are going to need your scratch paper if you're a person who likes to practice the shapes of things. Okay, so I've got just a piece of regular old paper that was hanging out in my office, and I suggest you use a pencil, but I'm going to use a marker just so y'all can see a little bit better. And I have a reference sheet here, obviously, that I'm using. Okay, so a lot of these are going to, again, work off with us building kind of like a structure or skeleton of the leaf to start out with. But a really basic shape to use is starting out with a stem. And then we go like that, and like that, and around. Then we have a very basic leaf shape. There. Maybe we're going to do some berries since we're doing a little bit of fall here. And it actually, well, for Texas, it feels like fall today. And as the only difference with doing a berry and kind of doing the structure of a fern is instead of having your leaf structure start at the top here, we're actually going to the side. So I'm starting from here to here and kind of making these little flower petal shapes. And I'm going to stagger some more as we go. And those are connected directly to the stem. Maybe we have some symmetrical ones down on the bottom. Maybe we have some ones that are not connected directly to the stem. Berry on the end. Now, if we want to add something like a rose hip berry or something like that, you would start out with a circle and just a little U shape like that. So it looks like a little blueberry. And we're going to draw him a friend and another little half circle. Stem, meet stem. And I'm going to draw a couple of extra little stems. My light went out. Okay. And we're going to add those basic leaf shapes there. Maybe we have a couple that are overlapping. And then we have a little sprig of a berry. A really simple fall leaf to do is starting out with a stem like that. And then we're drawing ourselves a little structure again. This one's a little bit more sparse. And these are things that anybody can draw. We're not asking you to draw a perfect circle, nothing like that. We have, of course, a stem for a leaf here that starts pointed. I'm just going to do some jagged lines around the outside to get a shape there. And if you're feeling really ambitious, there is a trick to use to draw a maple leaf, which is kind of like the ideal fall leaf to draw. I don't know, I guess. That's what I read online, so it must be true, right? So I'm going to draw a stem like normal. I'm going to draw a diagonal line through it. And one like that. So I've created an X. So now we have the structure of the star shape of a maple leaf. So I would jaggedly create little like pyramid shapes around there. Make sure we're going in. Move your paper if that helps you. And now we have the basic structure of a maple leaf. Again, if you're using pencil, you can erase this. So the reason I had us like kind of practice and envision the shapes because it makes it a little bit easier. That way we won't have to use a lot of outline when we're actually doing these leaf shapes on our paper, on our watercolor paper rather. So I'm going to just put my little sketch here to the side as point of reference. I'll put it in front of me, why not? And I am going to use the base of the greens that I mixed up earlier, but I'm just going to start to add oranges and reds and yellows and browns to them in order to create the appearance of autumn leaf. So I'm going to take my big fat brush here, number 12, and I am just going to jump head on into this orange color. And I'm really digging in here, so much so, well, don't destroy your paint like I did. So much so that the bristle guided it, got a little excited. And I'm gonna grab this orange color and put it on my palette. And I'm just going to bring in a little bit of that bluish color. You can do the same with the green if you want, to make this kind of saturated, rusty orange. Here, I'm going to make another puddle. To this one, I'm going to add some red. Really get in there. And I'm going to add a little bit of that blue to it as well to cool it down. That way we're going to have similar tones to our paints. And by that I mean just using warm or cool tones to adjust the colors that you're mixing. That way you have a little bit of harmony on your pieces. So you have to just kind of decide what you're feeling that day, if you want your overall look of the piece to be a little bit warm or a little bit cool. So if you want it to be cooler, you're going to add blue. If you want it to be warmer, you're going to add reds and oranges. I'm going to go crazy and add a little yellow. And I'm really going to get a good amount of paint on here because these fall leaves, at least the first ones we're going to start with, are a bit on the thick side. Just going to touch. So I'm going to very, very lightly, using the tip of my brush, start in the upper, there we go. I don't know why I did that. The upper left-hand corner of my paper and create myself a stem. And from there, I'm going to start with the tip and push down to the belly to make one of those shapes on one side, another teardrop on the other, and fill it in. A bigger teardrop, fill it in some more. Just kind of let the brush guide you around that stem, which will get lost initially, but that's okay. So now that you've got the basic shape, we can go in and add the browner tones to it. I'm going to switch to a little bit of a smaller brush. This is the number 10. I'm using that to deposit pigment on the edges of this red leaf. I'm going to take some pure red right out of the pan and let that sort of bleed all over this basic structure we have going. Okay, now we're going to let that chill out while we make some other leaves. That way we can add the stem going down the center detail in just a bit. But while we have this pretty orangey color, which I'm going to add additional orange to, on our brush, I'm going to go ahead and come down here and create a stem for myself. And we're going to do that initial tip to the belly, connect, create for ourselves a little skeleton again. You can tell I'm feeling fall vibes, referring to things as skeletons. I guess it should be technically a structure. And this is the 1, 2, 1, 2 method that we used in the very beginning to create those basic leaf shapes. And I'm going to just define those a little bit. Maybe one leaf is bigger than the other. That happens. Accidents are opportunities in watercolor. I promise I'm not like creepy and super optimistic in real life, something about painting. Kind of just makes me so relaxed that I don't allow myself to get upset about things when they don't go exactly as planned. And again, the thing with fall leaves is we're going to let them sit and dry, so then we can do wet into dry painting to add additional color to them. I'm actually going to go into a brown now to do a little bit of a berry. And just a basic brownie brown. That's a thing. It's brown out of the pan and a little bit of that blue seeped into it. So I cooled that off a bit. And then I'm going to go into the purple and I'm going to add that to some of the green I had over here. And I'm really going to get like a nice saturated pigment going on, like a jewel tone almost. I'm going to dull it with just a little bit of brown just to unify the situation. Now my water is officially filthy. So we're going to go into the brown with, switch to a smaller brush. This is the number 6. I'm going to get some water on it, pick up some of that brown, just touch it to my paper towel. And I'm going to work on the little berry situation that we drew out earlier. So I'm going to start with the very tippy tip of my brush and just barely touching my paper. Drag it down. Drag that one up. Now you can choose to rinse off your brush after this or not. It doesn't really matter. But I'm going to pick up some of that really beautiful jewel toned purple. And I'm going to start to make my little berries. So I'm using the tip of the brush to create a teardrop shape. Pick up a little bit more of that purple. Maybe this one is bigger. Oop, too much. Remember, if you got too much and you see it about to drip off the tip of your brush, you probably have too much paint on there. So just go ahead and dip that on your paper towel. So again, using the tip of my brush just to create these little teardrop shapes. Just going around. Maybe we have one on the end. Add some more depth to these guys. I'm going to rinse off my brush here. And I am going to go into a green that I have pre-mixed here. Let's make it a little bit more pigmented there. And I'm going to use the tip of my brush again to connect the berries to the brown branch, even in little spots. There we go. And then from there, I'm going to pull out some of that green that I just added and add little sprigs of leaves. What kind of berry is this? I have no idea. We just invented it. You can also add little leaves to the stem where berries don't live. Again, just using the very tip of your brush. And add some more brown. Make a nice deep color. And we'll add more depth to that stem. And I'm not worrying about the colors meeting and mingling with one another, because that is just going to add more interest in the end. That's still not dry yet. How to do a rosehip berry. Is it pink? I don't know. We're gonna go with this orangey color. And this one is so simple. You're just gonna make 2 of those guys, circles. Guys, it's been a day. Go into your brown, blot, and then you're gonna create a couple of stems. These can be thicker or thinner, totally up to you. I'm not moving enough. There we go. I'm gonna go back into a green color to add some leaves to these guys. Maybe a little one lives over here. Quick strokes to connect. You got a little negative space in there, leave her be. Gonna add a little bit of deeper red to my berries there, just kind of let that bleed out. And while I have this beautiful pigment on my brush, I'm gonna go ahead and add some detail to this guy that we created earlier. I'm just gonna put some splotches of a deeper red and a brown. You could even add some yellow if you're feeling adventurous. Just add a little water to that. Yellow is really going to add those beautiful fiery tones of autumn. I'm from the Northeast, so I missed foliage. If anybody knows of a place in Texas where the leaves actually change color, please leave it in the chat.
Lost Maple State Park.
Oh, okay. So I'm just going to add a little bit more detail in red. These little orange guys we did earlier. Oh, we're going to drip paint on our paper. But now, you know what? We're going to go with it. We're inventing stuff. And you just invented new fall foliage with yellow berries. Why not? I'm not going to be disingenuous and be like, oh, I need to start over. I did not mean to do that, but that is okay because I actually like that a bit. That's actually really pretty. See, water painting is magical. Watercolor painting, the fact that you have so little control, it really does you a favor. And I'm just going to connect those yellow guys with some brown. Maybe the stem here is behind it. I'll add a little bit of brown to these guys at the bottom. Ooh, much better. There we go. Beautiful. Going to add a little bit of deeper brown. Actually, I'm gonna add a little black to this brown to really get it nice and dark. Because I did such a jewel toned color over here on our berries, our stem got a little bit lost, but we're gonna bring it back. And that again is by using the very tip of our brush, barely touching the paper. But really deepening the color of the stem or the branch in this particular case. But you get the idea. So you can do this sort of mottled red, orange, yellow brown technique with any of the leaf shapes that we talked about. So any of the ones, the basic ones that we started with, you can use the same techniques to kind of do foliage through the seasons. And you can either use wet into dry to add the veins of the leaves, or you can actually use a ballpoint pen to add more detail, like in a graphic way. That's something that works out normally too. The last leaf I'm going to show you guys before I answer your questions, because I have 4 minutes left, is I'm going to do kind of a tropical leaf, and this one's pretty simple, but it's really fun, and you're just going to need a skinny brush, the skinniest brush you got, and a good puddle of green. Whatever color tone green you want, but this should be a bit brighter, so I suggest adding warmer tones to it, like the yellow, because this is tropical, right? We want it to have summer feels. Okay, so this is nice and saturated. I've got a nice grassy green color, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to start again by doing a stem, a very skinny stem, like so. And we're going to create kind of like a star-shaped leaf, but you'll see. So use that basic technique to make the starting leaf at the top. And then what we're going to do is alternate up and down until we need more pigment, like that. Really just keep alternating between the tip of the brush and the belly. And get a little bit thicker as we move down. Want that to be a little bit pointier. And I'm picking up more pigment as I see fit. Deepening around the center. I think it'll help if I twist my paper there. If you're like me and tend to drag your hand into your paintings, do not be afraid to move your paper around. There is no shame in it. I'm going to go in, add a little bit of yellow to that green that I was just using. I have 1 more minute. I planned this really well. I'm just going to use that to add depth. But you kind of get the idea. Leaves are all about using that basic technique of alternating between using the tip of your brush and the belly of your brush to create different shapes. Oh, there's my alarm. There we go, sorry. Vincent Price, everybody. And there you have it. We painted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different kinds of leaves in an hour, which I think is pretty good. So I'm going to go through your chat and answer questions if there are. Okay, I see that I was going pretty fast. The recording. Mario, okay. All right, so there are no questions in the chat. Is there any questions that people want to ask while we have a few more minutes to go?
Yes, Jen. I'm sorry I didn't get a chance to ask this question in the chat, but I'm wondering if you could demo the basic leaf shape just one more time.
Sure.
To kind of show that beautiful like tapering that you're able to do.
Yeah. Okay. So I will do that on a new sheet of paper. And for our purposes, I am going to do it relatively large. So I'm using a really big brush. I'm using a size 12. And I'm going to dip it into this really deep purple just for demoing techniques. So it's really saturated in color. I'm blotting it on my paper towel, and you can see the point here is really, really fine. It really got it thin. So we're going to start by touching the tip of your brush to your paper. And then as I draw it down, I'm doing that. So again, tip, push down, pull up. Use the tip to fill in and to define. And one more time, that's tip, push down, pull up, tip, push down, pull up. Feel free to use the negative space that you create in the center too, because leaves sometimes have holes in them. One more time, tip, push down, pull up, tip, push down, pull up. Use the tip of your brush to define your shape. And really all I'm doing is kind of pushing the color around. In the initial parts, we're not depositing additional color, although you can do that. Since here I'm adding some blue and just letting it bleed into it like that. Is that helpful?
That is super, super helpful. I realized like I wasn't really like squishing down, but like you start really thin at the top and then really go into it. And that gives it that nice kind of round shape before it tapers back down.
Yeah, just really use the brush to your advantage and just play around. I wish there
Mhm.
wasn't a glare. The lighting is actually better in my house than my office. Next week I'll be in my house again.
Cool.
We're on an alternating schedule. We get it, right? We're all on a weird schedule right now. So anyone else have any questions?
I have a question. This is Carolina. Um, I would like to do like 4 trees with 4 seasons with the same leaf shape, kind of, and just do the change of colors, like maybe do 4 quadrants and then have like the general tree shape, maybe drawn with a pen or pencil.
Yeah,
Uh, and then just color in leaves for spring, for summer, for fall, and for winter.
right. Okay, that's definitely something we can do. Next week is actually trees. So if you tune in next week, we actually will be doing that. We're not doing anything photorealistic, but we will see how to mix up the colors to do the 4 seasons, just kind of like we did here. We did some more springy leaves, more muted leaves. We did more summery bright leaves. And then we also did those deep fall colored leaves. And I hope to do the same thing with the trees next week. So just tune in next week and you'll definitely be able to achieve that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Oh, beautiful. Yeah, if you feel free to show your works if you'd like. I always like to see what my students come up with when we're done. But thank you all for joining us once again. I've timed this really perfectly, and as an educator, that makes me very proud. I'm gonna pat myself on the back. Excellent. So beautiful. I love having you all here to paint with me, and I hope you'll be able to join me again next week at 5 o'clock on Thursday, where